So you're thinking about moving away or out of Japan. How long have you been there, by the way? It's been a while now, like almost maybe not a full decade, but I don't know.
No, I've been here since COVID. No, before COVID, 2019.
Oh, why does it
So,
feel like way longer? Okay. That is still kind of a
yeah, so
long time to be
since
fair. It's about what, 5 years now? I feel like time has flown in over that COVID period.
so I think what would that be? 2019, 20, 21, 22, 23.
Yeah,
Wait,
coming on six now.
20, 21, 22, 23. Wow.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. It's gonna be 6 years.
Crazy.
Yeah, I spent the greater years of my 20s in Japan. Nice
Yeah.
though.
That's pretty cool, man. Like you got a different cultural experience than most
Yeah.
folks, most black men especially. Like that's a very particular, unique perspective that you have to offer the world or Atlanta, I guess, when you head back over there. I don't know. What are some of the things that you think maybe you picked up from there? Because I feel like that's not a lot of people experience that. My little brother actually just came back from visiting Japan, and he went to go. He
Really? Oh, nice.
yeah, yeah, he did it for his birthday with a couple of his friends, and
Okay.
they went around some of the major cities. Obviously, but they also climbed Mount Fuji, and were able to kind of
Nice,
take in some of those
nice.
views. And he's planning on going back at some point. So I was like, oh man, that's amazing. Like I got a homie out there. Maybe you guys can link. But
Worth it. So I'm trying to think where to even start because I actually just had this conversation with my brothers like 2 nights ago when we were
go
just
ahead.
finished traveling.
Yeah.
But and like a lot of the stuff that I learned isn't necessarily like Japanese specifically. It's just kind of just coming of age in my late 20s that I've learned.
Yeah. True.
But I think one thing that I've learned here in Japan is like the first thing I learned is how like when interacting with people, just socially,
Mm,
I start to realize why a lot of issues happen between individuals.
mm.
And so I try to like take that and like learn, but some like key things that I started learning was that, a lot of issues that happen in between people is that one, people don't listen, genuinely listen to the other person.
Yeah.
And two, I noticed that I don't think people I was thinking about this morning and like is that I don't think many people empathize with somebody who has an opinion opposite of your own. And I don't
Why
know.
do you think
I
that
feel like
is?
that's kind of
Why
rare.
is that? I think that you're spot on, but it's so difficult to get people outside of their bubble to because there's this thing called I don't know, I forget what they call it in psychology, like association bias or something like that, where you essentially think
I
of
got you. I
yourself
got you.
as you know what I mean? Like when you do something wrong, you associate that with the context or the environment, but when somebody else does something, you associate it with their character. Like you cut someone off, you're like, oh, sorry, I'm in a rush. Somebody else cuts you off, you're like, that person is a terrible mother. You know what I'm saying? It's like, how do we get
Yeah,
past that?
dude.
You know?
Dude, it's so man. Like,
I think the media plays a
I mean,
part
the
of
only
it.
thing.
Like right now, I'm studying journalism, and a lot of things that we're
Okay.
learning are about those inherent biases, but also wider about the media biases and how they play into our own individual ones. Like they can kind of, like in the same way marketing kind of preys on people's psychological weaknesses to sell them stuff. I think journalism can sometimes prey on people's ignorance or their lack of contextual awareness to whereas I believe it should be bringing people together by uniting perspectives, by helping people understand. And that's why I like certain tools out there, like this one called Ground News, where it's just like a news aggregator. But then there are obviously agendas that some
Mm.
people push that keep people in those bubbles. So it's like, again, I don't want to cut you off again, but like, I don't know, maybe it's because Japan
No,
is a
you're
more
good.
intentional, slower society. Like, how do you learn to listen in that way?
I mean, truthfully, like, Japan's not the answer. Japan has its own issues,
Hmm.
but this is just like a worldwide thing. And I think it's like to get somebody to listen to somebody that they disagree with is very rare. But I think you can do it by having people like showing more compassion towards the other person. Like, this is kind of like this one thing I started thinking about this more deeply a couple of years ago, where I saw a YouTuber. It was like a black police officer, and he was interviewing KKK members,
Mm.
right? And the whole point of it was like, clearly I disagree with what you believe in, but I'm willing to like hear you out,
Yeah,
you know? And like in his conversations, he actually ended up like one of the KKK members actually ended up like leaving the group
yeah.
because they said I actually never had a conversation with a black man. I just hated your race because that's what I've
It's
been
crazy
taught.
how
But
that works.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's very crazy because that happens all the time around the world.
Yeah, yeah.
But so the fact that the police officer, I wish I knew his name and channel or something, but the fact that he was willing to like, put aside this anger and this emotional response towards somebody who hates him, he was then able to actually, enlighten the other person. And
Mm,
like I think in order for somebody to like listen, I think it just requires a lot of patience.
yeah,
Because of course you're gonna hear stuff that's gonna make you pissed and upset, naturally.
yeah.
But
One of the things
patience,
that,
dude, and like,
yeah.
yeah, that go for it.
Well, I was gonna say because we have this. I feel like we have our conversations like almost annual at this point. It's like a checkup, and there's maybe not annual,
Yeah,
but maybe a biannual. I don't know, like, but this is not our first rodeo. And one of the talks before, we had been conversing about the concept of love and maybe if it could be like a currency, like what it would look like, and um, obviously we're a day away from this U.S. election, which I think has a big trickle down effect around the world. And so it becomes even more difficult to
yeah,
listen to people like and then I don't know, like I guess what I'm getting at is yes, we need compassion, but I think one of the things that preempts this sort of judgment or blocking or shaming society is this idea that you know the other person fully and you can make a
right.
complete judgment about them when the reality is they might not even know themselves. They might be lashing out of some anger or pain in their past. And I think that's what the police officer maybe recognized is that by approaching this, it's not that I'm justifying their opinion or platforming an opinion that I don't agree with. It's more so that I'm trying to understand so that I can better interface with this group of people that I don't know. And maybe in the process of that interface, there can be a rethinking, a retooling.
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah,
what you
yeah,
think
yeah,
about
yeah.
that. Like that seems to me like part
No,
of the problem. Like compassion is definitely part of it, but it's almost like we have to recognize that we don't have all the answers either.
yeah, but not many people are willing to like think that, especially if it's like a strong like
Mm,
something you're against. And like, so I think those two things is like, yeah, the first one, I think people just aren't willing to admit that maybe they don't have the full picture when it's something like so passionate,
yeah,
like when we're talking about things that are like serious disagreements of like
right.
hatred and like racism and
Yeah,
things, it's hard to like try to like understand somebody who hates you so much or who like
yeah,
wants you dead, like, a KKK member.
yeah,
But the second thing though is that I genuinely think people are probably just like too selfish, dude. People are like, and I think all this ties together. I think
yeah.
people genuinely, and of course I get like, naturally you have to be somewhat selfish. Like I get
Hmm.
that part, but like I genuinely think people are too selfish. For example, if everybody helped each other out with their problems, I think we could solve all of our problems easily instead of everybody trying to solve their own problems by themselves. And so, and like I see it, and I'm like, for myself, I forgot, like I heard this from somebody. I think it was like some billionaire interview, and they're pretty much just talking about karma and how they're saying like, if you try to help somebody else, you will ultimately help yourself in the process. I don't know. They just said some like spiritual way. Weird if you believe it or not. But I
Yeah.
do think there is some truth to that because like for myself, one of the things I try to do in life is that when I meet somebody, if I know I can bring value to your life, especially if it's at like Like, no hurt to me, if it's just like, oh, I could do this for you. It'll just take 10 minutes of my time and it brings a lot of value to your life. I would do it. But I know a lot of people are so focused on their own problems that they would just blow them off and say, I don't have time to help you. And I think
That's
that is
true.
kind of an issue because
That's
nobody
true.
kind of shows the willingness to help each other and they don't. No, I think people are just very like, inward focused instead of outward. And I think
Yeah.
that leads to people not wanting to give other people's
Yeah.
perspective and no empathy and stuff.
I think we are in this culture of
It's a lot.
self-obsession and um that leads to like a lack of outward vision. Like when you key in on the fact that other people might need something, like even in the beginning of the day, for me, like obviously I'm a Christian. I'm a big believer in this book. And one of the things it says is give and it will come back to you. Good measure, pressed down and shaken together. And what it means by that, it's like,
Mm,
when you put something in a jar or you're trying to like condense some stuff and you put it in there and then you press it down, you shake it. It's like when you're trying to make more space in the garbage can, you can fit more in there. And so it's kind of like this idea that when you give, it's actually a form of getting, but people don't recognize that, even though all of our wisdom traditions throughout the ages have kind of pointed to this truth, this truism that giving is better than getting. I think we in our hyper competitive age are so hesitant because it feels like if I give, then I'm losing something. When I believe the reality is that when you give something, you actually multiply it. You almost get it twice. Psychologically, I feel like when you give, you improve that person's life, but you also improve your own well-being and self-concept and other things that then multiply into the future. It's almost like this weird form of um, creation where it's like instead of slicing the pie, you're just growing the pie bigger. And I think that comes
yeah,
from
yeah, yeah.
my mindset of having this sort of, some people call it an abundance mindset instead of like this,
Mm,
restrictive mindset of, there's only so many resources that we have to fight over. It's more so that there are an abundance of resources. Like we're getting close to, maybe we could speak a little bit about this with your background as an engineer, things like free energy and solar and nuclear energy and things like that, or maybe even talking about just that concept of what, a financial system that wasn't rooted on like lack and stuff look like. Like one of the people that I worked for recently was called the Borgen Project, and I had some issues with them because their whole concept was focusing on poverty. And I get it because they are trying to solve poverty in the global south, especially in places like Africa. But they do it by focusing on the poverty. And to me, that negates the truism that there is more than enough. And we just need to redirect our gaze to think of solutions rather than like harping on the problems. And that's just my personal opinion. But I get the need, maybe those systems and those caveats that allow us to recognize that there is a problem. But I think that when we look at the problem too much, we become part of it. And what we need to do is
yeah.
begin building the future. So maybe you could
Mm.
speak to this idea too, a little bit of like how you see an abundant future. Like, is there a such thing in your view of a world where people are able to give not because they feel like it makes them a better person, but just because it's the logical thing to do? Like, how will we get to a place where the incentives actually are forgiving,
I think
forgiving,
like,
ironically?
yeah, I think so. Here's how I got to it, and I think maybe this probably translates to other people. And then I had a recent situation actually, like 2 months ago for myself. And I think for me, I kind of got to this mindset because I called out my own hypocrisy. So here's the example. Um, like this past like late summer,
Mhm.
I was trying to find opportunities in the United States. I hope somebody out there will like help me out and put me on with some engineering opportunity, right? Get
Yeah,
some funding for my company. I hope somebody looks out for me.
yeah.
Hopefully the world's good. And then simultaneously, there are college students, in my LinkedIn. who are like, "Hey, Steve, can you help me, get a research position in your university?" Right?
Right.
And I will blow them off because I don't
Mm,
have time.
yeah. Yeah.
And
I
then
see
one
where this is
night,
going.
one of the guys, yeah, yeah, I mean, it's kind of clear, right? It's kind of clear. And then one night, I
Yeah.
was just thinking about like, oh man, like I really wish this guy gets back to me. Simultaneously, I had a message pop up on my LinkedIn, and it just clicked to me. I'm like, okay, I'm being a hypocrite.
Mhm.
And then that moment was like, okay, ultimately, I talked to the guy and I got him a position as my intern in Japan, starting in December. And now,
Wow.
whether if somebody else helps me out in the United States, that's beside the point. But it's the fact that I was like, I kind of said, like, okay, I'm being hypocritical because I'm so focused on myself that now
Yeah.
I'm focused on somebody else. And ultimately, if they pass the buck forward, then somebody else will benefit from what I gave. And
Yeah.
then ultimately, it'll hopefully make a full circle back to me.
Yeah.
So I feel like in order to kind of get people to that mindset of giving, I think people need to be kind of self-critical of like, okay, I think I'm actually being hypocritical because I'm asking people to
Yeah.
help me, but I'm not willing to help people in return.
It's
But I don't
weird
I
that
don't
that
think people are doing that though. Nobody
no.
wants to call themselves a
Of
hypocrite,
course not. Of course not. And it's weird that
right?
that self-infatuation, that narcissism that we live in doesn't also lead to self-criticism. I guess it's not really weird, but it's like we
Yeah.
completely miss the opportunity to accurately assess ourselves, and that would yield huge dividends. But I almost feel like there's this perception in the world that to accurately self-assess yourself somehow denigrates your capacity to influence or lead or something like that. Like admitting that you have weaknesses, that you have flaws, that you have failures, that you have to work on somehow makes you less. But I actually think it makes
Yeah.
you more. Like the concept of kintsugi, which is indigenous to Japan, right? Like the broken things that get repaired with the golden adhesive, and then the end result is this
Okay,
more
okay.
beautiful piece of pottery. It's like that concept that if we are broken together and we recognize that our flaws actually make us more human and not less, then we have more empathy for each other. One of my favorite artists, his name is Propaganda, ironically, and he's a
Okay.
poet slash spoken word artist. But one of his albums is called, well, he has a lot on this kind of subject, but one of them I really like was called Crimson Cord. Another one called Crooked I like too, but Crimson Cord was one that really drove this point home, that the thread that binds all of us is one of sin. He's a Christian artist, but he's not like a religious one, if you will, I guess. And so he's somebody
I
who's
get it.
inspired by this idea of the imago Dei, being made in his image, but also being these fallen creatures who need some sort of restoration. And he thinks that by looking at each other through a lens of understanding, we can actually begin to heal and repair some of those binds that keep us together. And I think that that maybe goes into it a bit as well. It's like that self criticism is almost a pretext for our new type of humanity. Like we need that as almost like a salve against this overindulgent, egoistic society that makes everyone think that they're the best. We need to take a step back and realize actually we're all kind of shit. Like, not like,
Yeah.
that's not like a terrible thing. Like we're human beings, it's okay, but we're also incredible. Like, it's like the duality of man, or Schrodinger's cat, or however you want to put it. It's like we have all of these things. One of my favorite poets is Walt Whitman, and he says, I am large. Or it's like, do you think I contradict myself? Of course, I contradict myself. I am large and I contain multitudes. And that line has always stuck with me. It's like, wow, I am large, I contain multitudes. So yeah, I'm gonna have some slip ups. I'm gonna be a little hypocritical here or there. It's admitting that that allows us to be more human, not somebody that who's like, oh man, I'm a bad person, I can't, whatever. Oh, like that's up.
Right.
It's cool. That's why,
But
like the
nobody
Bible says
wants to
to
do that though.
nobody wants to do it, man. And it's like we're so scared of being judged that we forget that we're here to heal each other. We're here to lead each other home. I don't know. That's my opinion, at least.
So let me ask you this then.
Yeah.
That same situation that I found myself hypocritical on,
Hmm.
for yourself, is there something that you're hoping somebody does for you that you're not doing for somebody else?
Ooh. I mean, there's always the money thing, and like sometimes I just wish $5,000 would fall from the sky, and then I walk by somebody who's homeless on the street. That's one of those things that I
Don't
think when
even
you
give them
key
a
yourself
five.
into a mindset of just giving, it's easier. Because when I did, like, I was walking to the beach one day, I had like 10 pounds in my pocket, and I'm not very rich, so that was a lot of money to me. And then a guy just like comes up to me, he's like, "Yo, you got any cash on you?" And I'm like, usually if I have like a couple like pound coins, I'll give them up. And I'm like, "Oh, I got a tenner, bro. I'm not trying to give you that right now." But I was like looking at my wallet to kind of fake pretend I was gonna give him something. And then he saw the 10 and he's like, "Oh, bro, that would give me like a place to live for the next 2 nights." And I'm like, all right, man, gives it to him, go to the beach. And it was like 2 days later, I get like a tax return for like 800 pounds from the state. I'm like,
Tax returns.
what? It's like a weird thing. I don't even remember paying my taxes.
Tax
Like,
returns,
okay,
man.
okay, cool, I'll take it. But it's like, those are those weird moments of like divine realization that when you do give, it comes back to you in some way, shape, or form, even if it's not material. Obviously, that case, maybe God was just trying to encourage me. But I'm sure that there are so many instances where maybe it's in empathy, like in the empathy that I wish to receive or the understanding that I wish to receive. Am I also giving
Yeah,
that out to people? I think that's a big one for me because as somebody who thinks a lot, it's very easy to think that you have the answers. And the reality is that I don't. Nobody really does. And so I need to enter into these conversations, which I try and do, and which is why I like having conversations with folks like you. It opens up my mind a bit because I'm forced to let down my guard and just be human with somebody. And whatever ideas pop up, pop up. Like I full disclosure, I woke up about, 10 minutes before this interview because I was up late trying to type up some stuff for my dissertation. I'm like, oh shoot, I gotta go. Quickly made this coffee, hopped on here, didn't have my notes, but I'm like, you know what, it'll be a good conversation because I feel like we have a little bit of a backstory and whatever comes up will come up. And
yeah, things
it,
flow pretty easily.
yeah. And so I think, I guess to answer your question succinctly, yes, there are definitely areas that I need to, and that self-assessment, well, honestly, it'll start today. I think that this has kind of given me a cause to pause in that regard. And like, there's like moments where you rush through them, and then you have to pause sometimes because when you give yourself that moment, that intermediary, to kind of recognize what you're doing, that's when you can change direction. And I think that's a sign of growth. Like sometimes you just like before I'm trying to stop. Well, I'm not trying to. I've successfully stopped cursing, right? That's how law of attraction works. And so when I say like I used to be very quick and flippant with, dropping the F-bomb,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
now like I'll be about to, and then I'll stop. I'll be like, freaking, or what the heck? And I think hopefully in time you get to a point where you almost recognize that train of thought as it's coming. And before you even get into the moment, you're able to like change course in your mind. It's almost like a closing of the gap of your reaction self to your thinking self and making this more
yeah.
symbiotic relationship to where you're able to use both parts of your brain in concert and ultimately come out with a better product at the end of it. So that's a long way of
I
saying,
think
yeah,
this
I
makes
definitely
sense.
am a hypocrite.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, everybody is. I think it's just like, yeah, you just kind of start to realize, like, when you talk to friends and family, and you're just like, I don't know, like when you do look at people's problems, you can kind of like, you can kind of start seeing why things are the way they are, and like,
Yeah,
yeah, that's where I got to the whole thing is like, just wish people would just listen to other people instead of just trying to, put feelings on people.
yeah,
And this goes with everything, like how I briefly mentioned, I guess like a couple of days ago with like politics coming up, and nobody wants to be
Oh yeah,
like,
let's talk about that a little bit
you
before
always
they
have
kick
those
us off this
hardcore
Zoom.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What do you what do you
yeah.
what are your thoughts
People
on
are always
this?
like so hardcore
Yeah.
on the
I
politics
hate
stuff.
that. Yeah, it's crazy because we're so divisive today. We're all, like everything is polarized and nobody listens to anybody. And that's I mean, it's bearing itself out in the process right now. But what do you think about this whole
The
election
perfect
season?
example, right?
Exactly.
I think I do wish that more people would be willing to like come together and like talk. And so one thing I actually learned in my lab that was actually kind of it was from a philosopher that I was working with us, and he said something that stuck with me. But he was they were saying that before you like criticize or debate like somebody opposite of your opinion, before you do that, you need to be able to explain their point of view better than or up to standard to what they say, okay, that's acceptable. And if you
Yeah.
can't do that, then you're not in a good position to like criticize, right?
Yeah.
And so with the politics, I'm even gonna say myself too, I don't really know what's going on with the politics. I can't say why one person's bad or good. I just
Yeah.
know what people say about them, but
Yeah.
I don't know if I haven't fact checked stuff. And
Yeah.
so like, if you talk to somebody who supports blue or red, they might say like, okay, well, I support blue because I hate red, but that's not really a reason why you support blue. It just shows why you don't like red,
Yeah.
and vice versa. So like, I wish there was, I don't know, like maybe I wish it was more like if the two different candidates from the different parties came together and like, I wonder if they did it in a way where instead of a debate, they
A
said,
dialogue
well,
over
you
a
two work
debate or something.
together. No, like work together. And
Interesting.
like what if we had a two-party system that actually like we had two presidents and all of the decisions were the middle ground? Or like I don't know, what if it was just that? Like what if we just have like, all right, we have two parties and like now we just have two presidents. And
I
I
bet
don't
there's a
know,
bunch of
like I mean
political
I'm just
scientists that are angry right now or will be angry with that statement. Because this
I
it's
can
like the
imagine.
whole like concept of competition and winning dictates that there has to be one winner. You know, like there's I gotta and I
But
think
that's
that
the problem. It's like,
yeah,
what's the goal of politics? Is it to win or is it to better the country?
that's the thing. That's why I've always been a huge proponent of I'll be, I'm a yay guy. And I'm a
All
yay guy
right, fair enough.
unapologetically, not even
I
because of
get
what
it.
he like. It's more so from a fact of if you want to talk about, okay, bring it down to the ground floor. Maybe I should say I'm a third party guy. I've always been this ideologue in the sense that maybe not ideologue, an idealist. I think that a third party would bring the gravity of this very polarized system back to a middle ground so that you would have a candidate that could take the best of both sides. I believe that like political scientists will say that there's the reason polarization happens is because there's this two-party system. And essentially, in order to appeal more to your side, you have to go more to your side. And over time, the most ardent supporters of that side are the most left or the most right. And it's very difficult to then have any say in the other side's politics. And the reason why I think Great Britain, for all of its flaws, works so well and it's existed for so long, is because it has this contingency. It has so many different parties. Most people only know, Labor and Conservative, but there's like the Lib Dems, there's the Green Party, there's the Reform UK, and all of these different parties have their agendas. But what they cause is an increase of debate because you have a cohort of people who are strictly here for environmental reasons. You have a cohort of people who are strictly here because they think immigration is the worst evil. And then you have a cohort of people who are strictly here, but they don't represent the entire party. They represent their own things. And so when you have these debates in parliament, as they call it, essentially these things become fleshed out in a more like I think the problem of UK politics is more stratification versus polarization. Like you have all of these different, voting blocks that maybe are Like they talk about one issue voters, and that might be such a narrow way to vote. But what it does is that it at least allows for people to take account of what's really happening and not just be thrown in this amorphous left or right group. I think the concept of having two party candidates coming together, I think in a perfect world would work, but ultimately it takes into account like are they going to be undercutting each other at every turn? Are they really going to work together on policies? Is it going to be something where they have their group of congressmen and representatives, and the other one has their group, and they're almost fighting still, but under the banner or the guise of unity. But I do think that there is a need for more folks to come to the table. Like a lot of people would say, okay, I would never vote for EA5 like that. I don't think he's running now anyway. Like a Jill Stein or Cornel West or something like that. Fine. I personally, I feel like the greatest
EA
artist alive should at
2025.
least have a seat at the table. But hey, it is what it is.
Yeah, okay.
I
I
feel
mean,
like
why
it's just
not?
like
It's America.
somebody like who could be a lightning rod and also be somebody who could, because I do think that you'll need to take on tough situations because right now we have this war unraveling in the Middle East where both candidates advocate for the continual genocide of Palestinian people. And without getting, too political, because I do think probably the best solution is actually apolitics, like just anti-politics, like getting out of the system of who gets what and how they get it and debate and all this stuff, like just coming to a table and having
Yeah.
conversations like this. But within the political system that we now exist, I don't know, like I think there just needs to be this sort of breaking free moment where people are like, oh, I don't have to go with this candidate just because of this. I can actually talk about the things that matter to me and see how we can get to that place through, a more honest, a more perfect union, as it says in the preamble, right?
Yeah, and that and like there people always have like that group identity. So
Yeah,
like,
groupthink is powerful.
yeah, I feel like as a minority, a lot of times they'll be like, "Oh, did you vote for Trump?" And then if you're like, "Yeah," and then you kind of get like a scarlet letter. It's like, ah. I mean, like,
It's
I
true.
think that's the thing.
It's true.
It's,
It's true. Yo, when Ye wore the
you
manga
know,
hat, that was the end of his, like, that was the beginning of the end for him, bro.
it was,
Like,
right?
it was like, yo, you can't say that. You can't do that. Like, why?
Yeah, it's like,
And part
why
of it is
not?
because,
I mean,
like,
like, I'm not like,
not endorsing him, right? Like, I personally, I can't stand him for the same reasons other people can't stand him. It's just that our hyperfixation on his badness is what's also causing us to remain stagnant. Like part of what you were talking about earlier, we have to self-criticize, but we can't do that when we have this boogeyman out there that we constantly are looking at for all of his flaws. Like we have no capacity as
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
as a
yeah.
united left to say, okay, maybe we have fallen short here, here, and there. And that's why some people are attracted to that. We have to automatically off put or export all of our sins onto this guy in order to, beat Hitler. When it's like, yo, maybe there's some things that we haven't been fully honest with, or some of the things that we haven't completely lived up to our standards in. And that would help everybody. But it's like, again, in this zero sum game where admitting that you're wrong is like a death sentence, very, very difficult to do.
Right. That would be interesting if it was like a political thing where instead of, on the commercials, you're like, this candidate does this and they don't want you to be happy, while my candidate does this, and it's like black and white versus like
Yeah.
colorful picture.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting if it was like a self-critical image where it was like,
Oh,
our candidate's been shown to do this stuff, but here's how we're gonna make it better,
yeah.
and here's how we're going to improve what people think we're not doing. Stuff like that. And like,
Yeah. Oh man,
maybe
that would
people
be
like,
so
okay,
healing.
it would be very healing, right?
That would
Like
be
if people were
so
like,
healing.
like, okay, I know my flaws, and this is what I'm
Yeah.
gonna do to get around those flaws. If I fix these flaws before the election, can I get your vote?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like, you know what? I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's a better conversation than just trying to prove that the other person's a devil. I don't know. Because like, at least I
You're
can say
right.
I'm voting for this person because they're doing better instead of
Yeah.
saying I'm voting for you because the other person's bad.
That's it. Like
It
if we
makes
could
more sense.
yeah, it does. It does. And I think that's the way forward, maybe. Like We'll see how long this American empire lasts. I feel like we're in the tremors or the turbulence era of this like breaking apart moment, and who knows what comes after
Yeah, I think
tomorrow.
so.
Like it feels like,
I think so.
I hope it ends in something that is filtered through love. But a lot of the
I
pragmatists will
think
tell you
so.
that it's going to be like a civil war type environment. And I don't know. I don't know what the future holds, but I do hope that at least, and maybe this is why we look more so on micro trends versus macro, is that individually we can make those changes and we can begin to change our own hearts. And hopefully in that, that thing can then multiply, like I said before. And then we can see that paying it forward type of change in our world today. But I don't know. Any last thoughts from you? I know Zoom is about to kick us off in a minute, but I love this
Yeah.
conversation
No,
and I appreciate your time.
I think the main thing is just that people just need to just be more empathetic towards somebody who has opposing views and
I
listen to
love
them.
that.
At least just listen.
Yeah. All right.
See what they have to say.
Love
All
that.
right.
Well, thank you for listening, whoever's out there. Hopefully made it to the end or so. Give us a like and subscribe. This is my guy, Stephen Estelle. Really good homie. Appreciate your time once again.
Mm-hmm.
Have a beautiful rest of your evening. Hope everything goes well on your
No
search
worries,
for
dude.
job in Atlanta.
I
Peace.
appreciate it, man.